Welcome to Southwest Florida Real Estate Update, hosted by area realtor Jim York and York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. Our show will bring you the most up-to-date information about the local real estate market, featuring leading experts in the real estate field.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Southwest Florida Real Estate Update. I'm Michael York with the York Real Estate Group, and I'm joined today by our host Jim York and his guest Don Ross of Ross Title and Escrow.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Well, Don, thanks for coming on the show today.
Welcome, Jim.
I just want to tell you, this is the 100th show that we've filmed here at Naples Daily News since
Amazing.
we left Comcast a couple of years ago.
Congratulations.
So, I'm proud to have you on it as our 100th show.
I want to watch. Please.
So, Don, for the viewers that haven't seen the show, give them a little background about yourself.
I am an attorney. I have been a member of the Florida Bar since 1982. I've been in-house counsel for Downing Fry Realty for 25 years. I'm one of the owners. I own Ross Title and Escrow. We've got 8 employees. We're on the corner of 6th Avenue North and 41, right across from Pastrami Dan's. We've been together for one lady 30 years, and then down from there.
Right.
And also I have my own law firm, so I've been here for quite a while, do closings almost 100%.
Yeah, I know you've done a wonderful job for
Thank
our
you.
clients. So,
Appreciate
so
it.
we topic today is we just had a hurricane here in Naples that hit us, which is what once every. How often you've been here?
Worst storm in my life.
Right,
So yeah, not too often.
Not too often, right?
No.
Not too often. So, as you being an attorney and doing tremendous amount of closings, I think 25,000 in your lifetime
Yep.
here. What does a person, when they see a storm coming out in the ocean, or it's 2 or 3 days out, and it might not be a direct hit because that's not really the normal case, but it could have some damage here or impact on the community. What should a seller or buyer prepare? Like if they have a closing on Wednesday and we might get the effects on Tuesday or Wednesday. What should they do? Because this is the question people are asking us.
Well, it was interesting because obviously we just lived through that experience. Sellers should try to accelerate the closing so as they get their money, and then the responsibility of taking care of the property is on the buyer.
That's right.
And the buyer should try to postpone the closing. There's a provision in the NABOR contract that if they're unable to obtain insurance, they can delay the closing up to 30 days. So if the buyer can delay closing for whatever reason, they shift the risk of loss to the property to the seller. So that right before closing,
Right.
with the exception of one party who wanted to close, even though I said it's not a good idea, you might want to postpone it, but he was from another country and didn't quite understand, and was quite put out actually that I let my people go home and get ready for the hurricane the Thursday before. You're better off, if you're a buyer, postponing it if you can find some legal basis, and a seller accelerating it.
Okay. So my next question is that leads into, we have a couple different contracts in the state of Florida here. We have ours, that's our local board here.
Right.
And then we have the state one, Fire Bar. So what's in the contracts, either one that accommodates this or?
It's huge differences. As part of being in-house counsel for Downing Fry, I write these little articles explaining the contract for the new agents and even the more experienced agents on things like this. What they should do, what the differences between them. Well, there's the risk of loss paragraph, and the risk of loss between the Naples Board of Realtors contract and the Florida Association of Realtors and the Florida Bar contract or FAR Bar contract are radically different. The big difference between the two has to do with landscaping. With the Naples contract, the seller is obligated to replace trees, bushes, shrubs, whatever might be there before the hurricane. And I'm always telling the agents, take lots of photos so you can document what's there. I think I've used this as an example on a prior show, but before Wilma, I had a closing in Port Royal, and we recommended the same thing, take photos. They lost all their vegetation, and we got a $300,000 credit from the seller for the trees and so forth that were no longer there. Creighton Road got wiped out, all the banyans.
That's right, they
during
did.
Wilma. So if you take photos, document what's there, the risk of loss for the NABO contract includes the trees and the shrubs and so forth. The FARBAR, or the Florida Association of Realtor contract, does not require the seller to replace trees. Just remove them or prune them. So that's a big difference. FARBAR also has a 1.5% cap, 1.5% of the sales price cap on damages. The parties have the right to terminate the contract unless the buyer is willing just to take the 1.5% and close. NABOR doesn't have that cap, so it's open-ended, which, in hindsight, and I've had this conversation with probably at least half a dozen lawyers in town, most, a lot of them on the Legal Resources Committee.
Right.
Any lawyer who's done a significant number of closings, I've been on the phone with over the last week and a half. What does this mean in your opinion? What does that mean in your opinion? Because it's not real clear with the Naples Board of Realtors contract what the remedies are in certain situations. I had a closing yesterday. It was an estate property, and they lost hundreds of trees. Realtor calls, who's responsible to remove the trees? I said, well, I hate to tell you, the seller is, and they're also responsible to replace the trees.
Right.
He says, oh, we don't want to go down that road. But this contract, in all fairness, really both contracts, in fairness to the people who drafted them, they don't, you cannot have a contract that anticipates everything.
That's true.
It's just not possible. Or if it were possible, it'd be 100 pages long and nobody would read it or understand it, and it'd just cause more harm than give help. So this is not really built for a storm like this, or the storm that hit Houston, which had way worse damage than this area. This area is cleaning up pretty well, except for certain areas. So the risk of loss clauses are radically different. The FARBAR has a cap, NABOR does not. NABOR is not real clear on what happens if it's damages to the common elements of a condominium. You can make an argument either way. FARBAR, it has something in the comprehensive rider for condominiums exactly that the damages to the common elements are not to be considered. They're not considered part of the property that the buyer can use the risk of loss paragraph for. So if a few trees around the common elements get destroyed, the buyer under a FARBAR contract can't use that as a claim for damages or risk of loss provision.
So I assume that if the buyer and seller can't agree on damages, they can terminate.
Actually, no. It's interesting. Under NABOR, there is no right to terminate. Okay.
But they're supposed to replace the trees.
They're supposed to replace the trees, and with the common elements, and I have one tomorrow where the deposit is $50,000, and the buyer's 80-year-old lady and her daughter from another country. They're a little apprehensive, and they're seriously thinking just walking away from their deposit, which gets us into your default language in NABOR versus FARBAR. NABOR, they only go after the deposits made, $50,000.
Right.
FARBAR, they can go after the deposits made or agreed to be made. So the seller theoretically could go after somebody. Let's say it's under FARBAR and it's less than 1.5%. And the buyer's just nervous.
Right.
They're from another state, and they've been watching the national news nonstop for a week, like we were doing when I was visiting my brother in Jacksonville. They just get panicky, and it's our job as professionals to put it all in perspective. Here's the damage. We've been down here, my family, since the early 70s. Look at how amazingly well Naples and Marco has cleaned up. Every day I drive from Naples to Marco, and it's just impressive to me the amount of crews that are out there, how quickly it's being cleaned up, how resilient our area is. You do have some areas where the building code isn't the same. Everglades City,
Right.
Chokoloskee, Copeland, certain areas in Bonita that were just very low that suffered damage. But I live right across from the beach on Marco, and we lost a few trees and some screen panels. I'm blessed.
Yeah.
Most of the homes on my street are fine, right across the street from the beach.
Yeah, same thing where I live. So I think that we've been all fortunate, and then there's been some people that's not so fortunate.
It's a tragedy.
Right. The newer homes, I think, held up a lot better.
We moan and groan about the building code and how expensive it is, but this is where it pays off. Our houses are still standing.
Well, Don, we're going to take a little short break, and we're going to be back in 1 minute. Thank you.
Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Marco, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Think of the most experienced York Real Estate Group associated with the #1 brokerage in Naples, Downing Fry Realty, which produced $1.9 billion in sales in 2014, controlling 43% of all transactions in Naples. Jim, Michael, and Morgan York make up the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. With over $250 million in sales transactions, they can offer you the expertise and trust you want and need in a realtor. Call them today at 239-273-6727 or visit their website, www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.
Welcome back. When should we start getting ready, and how do we handle this? Like, your office was closed for a week. Was it a week?
It was closed for a week. It opened last Monday. We got Wi-Fi the prior Saturday. I had my people coming in Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, actually since Tuesday, right after the hurricane, to check on the status of the office, to call people, to reassure people. We're just waiting for Wi-Fi to get up.
Right.
Educate our clients that it's not just a question of whether we're up. The banks have to be up. The management companies have to be up so we can get estoppel letters. Everybody in the chain involved in a real estate closing has to be up. So I had a certain number of conversations with clients about acts of God or impossibility of performance, certain legal doctrine that gives them more time to close. So a lot of what we were doing before we had Wi-Fi up was just keeping people's moods in check. Things are looking pretty good here. Houses are still standing. There's a lot of branches laying around, but that's going to be picked up. And this is what happens with your closing. So we got to our clients as soon as we could, and then when we got Wi-Fi, there was a lot of. Then we actually just started doing closings like the second day we were open. I mean, today and tomorrow we're absolutely slammed.
How about the person that's getting a mortgage? Has that delayed you too? Are they going out and inspecting the homes before?
They're requiring reinspection to make sure the home is still insurable. That's standard. NABOR has a standard K that requires following the procedures of the lender. No problem with that. Both contracts require a good faith cooperation between the parties to implement the terms and conditions of the contract. So if the lender is requiring such and such because of a once-in-a-lifetime storm, hopefully, they're required under that good faith provision to extend a good faith effort.
Right.
There's a certain amount of jockeying going on. I see some buyers asking for escrows for proposed or maybe special assessments with condos in the future. And nobody's certain. They haven't had time to have insurance adjusters get out there. Not sure what the insurance company is going to cover. They're looking at reserves. So I've seen a number of those. I must say I'm gratified that people have, for the most part, been way more understanding, empathetic, sympathetic, kind than I expected. I'm actually a bit surprised. I thought the world was not going in a good direction, and this was very nice.
But there's no provisions in the contracts for them to do that?
None.
None. So it's a good faith. It's a good faith.
It's good faith. The FARBAR a rider for condos specifically indicates that the common elements is not to be considered part of the property for purposes of risk of loss and maintenance. So they just totally exclude it. With homeowners associations, FARBAR in 2016 had a number of different scenarios where it might be possible for the buyer to cancel under certain circumstances. 2017, they came up with a revised HOA summary disclosure that doesn't have that. It simply has a block where you check whether the seller or the buyer is liable for special assessments all the way up to closing. But nothing for things after the closing.
And you're also indicating that when people should have a reinspection after a storm, if they're a buyer.
Yes.
If they're a buyer.
Well, with the NABOR and the FARBAR contract, you're entitled to a walkthrough.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just take NABOR because we
Right.
deal with that more often. You know, there's 4 things you do in a walkthrough. You want to verify that any repairs the seller agreed to make were done correctly. You want to make sure everything that you've agreed to purchase is in fact there. Nobody took the refrigerator or anything like that. You want to verify that the property's been maintained, ordinary wear and tear accepted, from the effective date when the contract was last signed and delivered to the closing date. And that's where I hone in on and recommend now to my buyers, because of these unusual circumstances, get the original inspection company
Right.
that did your initial inspection in that first 15 days to do the walkthrough. And because it's the same people, they know what they had before, they can see if there's been a change from that initial inspection to now. And it's easier to prove that the change was caused by the hurricane.
Right.
It's apples and apples. If you use a different company, you run the risk that one might have been more comprehensive than the other,
Mm-hmm.
for want of a better phrase. But if it's the exact same company and they know what they did before,
Makes sense.
and
right.
then they come back, you know, they have more expertise than the average buyer. They can go into the attic and see if there's a stress crack with a truss and understand the significance, hopefully, more so than if the buyer, him or herself, did. So I think after something like this, whatever they charge to do it, it's well worth it. My eldest son, he owns a home on the island. He's a police officer here in town. He was filing his insurance claim, and he asked me what he should do. And I said, actually I used the inspector you use. I says, hire this gentleman. He's a master inspector, and he'll see things and understand the significance of things that you won't.
That's right.
I mean, you get another set of eyes. It never hurts to get another set of eyes, especially an educated set of eyes.
Right.
So use it, and he did, and he found some water intrusion, you know, that would have been missed.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's what I'm recommending to my buyers prior to closing.
Don, before we keep going here, I'm going to take another little short break.
Sure.
We'll be back in 1 minute again. Thank you.
Looking for a real estate closing agent in Southwest Florida? Ross Title and Escrow has over 25 years experience and has closed over 20,000 residential real estate transactions. Donald Ross Jr., president of Ross Title and Escrow and a practicing attorney in the state of Florida with a degree in taxation, is here to service your needs. Call Mr. Ross or one of our 4 closing agents for a free consultation today. Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Bonita Springs, or Estero? Think of the most experienced realtors, the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. Let's have a look at what the McLeans have to say about their experience working with the York Real Estate Group.
Jim York was our broker in acquiring our present home in Bonita Springs. His knowledge and integrity made the process go very smoothly.
It was a pleasure doing business with Jim York. Everything was done in a superbly professional manner.
Welcome back. Don, how do we prepare, or how did you prepare for this?
What I tell my children, you get some money, you fill up your cars, you put your valuables in a safe place. With us, it was it was funny. My wife was asking me, well, what do you want to save and what don't you want to save? And it was all, pictures of the children, the backup hard drives of the kids growing up, the videos,
Right.
The gifts from my grandparents that are worth probably 2 cents but mean something to me. So we put all that in a safe place, made sure that our loved ones were in a safe place, and then I grabbed my parents and we left. Now, what I'm doing, having lived through this, initially we were going to stay at my parents' home on Marco Island, which has the shutters. And after experiencing what it's like to be in their house with shutters wrapped around it and not knowing what the storm surge might be and all that, I have decided that we're just going to go with impact glass on my entire house. I have an older house that was built by my father and my uncles, near the Marriott in Marco. So we're preparing actually now for next time, if there is a next time. I mean, there's always going to be weather. There's always going to be rain. There'll be tropical storms. In the 44 years my family has owned this particular house, we have had 0 damage to the house except for the screen panels that I suffered the last storm, and three trees, I believe, and a few tiles on a barn that we have. The house itself, the roof was fine. So we're getting ready now, and we're looking at insurance policies. Now, I watched your show with Chris Mitchell recently, and no matter how many times I do a closing, how often I've been doing this, I always learn from these shows, and I'm going to re-examine all my insurance policies as well. So you get ready for now. You have a game plan in place on what you're going to do if you see something that might threaten the coast. What we did when we had young children, we usually just left because we didn't want to frighten the children.
That's right.
That was the main thing. And now, the big lesson for me is I like the glass rather than the shutters. I can open a window after the storm's passed and get some air if we're without power.
Right.
I would like to have a generator because when you come back, if there's no power for a week, you'd like to have groceries. That'd be nice. I used to look at it like you don't get the generator unless you're going to stay here, and I never stay here, almost never, because we had young children.
Right.
I didn't want the kids to be frightened. But now a generator just might be handy if there's an extended power outage.
Right.
So, for us, you go through the experience, you learn what's valuable in your life and what you want to do with it before you leave. You get your money, you put gas in your vehicles. Fortunately, again, my eldest is a cop, so I knew exactly what the road conditions were and how long it would take to get out of the state. So we left at exactly the right time, and protect your family.
Right.
That's it. But again, I'm 61. This is the worst storm I've seen in my life. I remember Hurricane Donna. I was living up in Massachusetts, so it's part of living here. It's not something that I lose my mind over. I can't pick a part of the country that is perfect, that doesn't have some weather issue that
You're
I'm
right.
not willing to put
We
up
have
with.
fires or tornadoes or whatever.
I mean, where
flooding,
you
right.
and I, you're
Right.
from Syracuse,
Snow.
I'm from Boston,
Right.
and I'm sorry, I'm not going back to the snow and the cold
Right.
and the 6 months of gray sky. I just don't want it. And you got mudslides and fires out west. We have fires in 9 states. One of my children moved to Washington, D.C., and they had an earthquake.
Right.
so where do you go? There's nowhere. This has been instructive. It helps reset your values, but it's the one in my entire life that has caused all these issues.
Well, let me just tell you a story, okay?
Oh, please.
So, we prepared, we got water, food, and gassed up the cars 3 or 4 days before, even longer than that. But, the storm moved a little bit, or a lot.
I noticed, yeah.
Okay, so we started putting stuff upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
We have a 2-story home, so my daughter decided, I told her put her computer away because she does a lot of work at the house, and so she put it underneath one of the vanities in a bathroom. And then my Bible, my computer is my Bible. You know, everything I have on it, even though it's an older computer, laptop. I put it in between the towels in the bathroom. You know, so
Above hers, though.
right. Well, hers was underneath the counter and you know, under the sink. Mine was in the linen closet. Okay? So we unpacked the whole house, did everything. Look, we can't find the computers. Okay, so finally, 2 days later, my daughter says, I know where mine is. Okay, so it was underneath. So I never looked under the vanity because I didn't put anything there. And then, you know, in the linen closet, I guess I was protecting the computer with the towels.
Here's my office.
So,
This has everything on it.
like you said before we end the show here, like you said, this this doesn't happen every year. Hopefully
No.
it doesn't, but it's it's something. But we should have on our radar to think about.
Well,
in the
there's certain
future.
basic things you should do out of reflex.
Yeah.
And I've been through a lot of these. I mean, I've been through Andrew and Charlie and Wilma and all those, and the only one that ever really concerned me was Andrew because it was heading right towards Marco. And again, we had children.
Right.
Says I cannot take chances with my children. So we went to North Carolina. But the things that are valuable to you, it's you take care of them. For me, the context is we've owned this house in my family for 44 years, and we've had minimal damage. We've had more damage in our house in Massachusetts in the first 21 years of my life than we did in this house. So Hurricane Donna did more damage up in Massachusetts than this storm did in my house on Marco.
Well, Don, I appreciate you coming on the show
appreciate
and
it.
being on the 100th show that we filmed here in Naples
I wanna
Daily
watch.
News. And I think it'll be very helpful for our
Thank you, Jim.
viewers.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in today.